for the rest of the guys, it can be more complex. It can be diet, it can be lifestyle. Some guys need to get some counseling. If there are issues with signaling the endocrine glands from the pituitary, there is also a good chance that where there's smoke, there's fire, and there could be other issues going on with other hormonal systems. If you are a patient on TRT, to understand that you need to meet the medicine halfway. You need to get yourself back on track to be able to get the best outcomes from your testosterone. It's not just going to do it for you. Here's the sales pitch that many guys get from their terrible clinics, which is, take this testosterone, get your blood work, we'll adjust the dose, we'll get it right, you'll be dialed in, and Bob's your uncle, you're all good. It sounds great, but it almost never works that simply. It does for a lot of guys, but for the rest of the guys, it can be more complex. It can be diet, it can be lifestyle. Some guys need to get some counseling. Some guys need some time to let things settle. But unfortunately, many patients and practitioners believe this one very simple fallacy, which is that testosterone is the panacea for all problems. Tired, lethargic, depressed, anxious, more test, bloated, emotional, overstimulated, not sleeping, shut the dose, and then we'll find the sweet spot and everything will be perfect in your life. It's not that simple. So there are many misconceptions around the impact of testosterone replacement therapy surrounding the endocrine system. So many men will not just require testosterone replacement therapy, but comprehensive hormone replacement therapy. There's a key variable, which I think is very important here, which is identifying what was the root cause of the low testosterone in the first place. If a man has got primary hypogonadism, it may be isolated. Some forms of secondary hypogonadism might also be isolated, but if there are issues with signaling the endocrine glands from the pituitary, there is also a good chance that where there's smoke, there's fire, and there could be other issues going on with other hormonal systems. So there's 4 key concepts I want to go through. There's 2 on here and 2 on the next slide before anyone gets smart. So if you have a testosterone deficiency, you may have other hormonal deficiencies too. So testosterone deficiency can occur in isolation in some people, while hormone deficiencies may also occur together in others. This is a very important note. Not everyone needs pregnenolone, DHEA, thyroid, etc., but some people do. Not everyone just needs testosterone replacement therapy, but some people do. So it's very important that everything's case by case and you're assessed by someone competent who can go through everything, take a good look at all your blood work, and actually get to the bottom of where your symptoms are coming from. And that's one of the reasons why Marek Health is such a fantastic clinic. So if the root cause of hypogonadism is secondary, which means that it's not related to failure of the testicles themselves, the root cause of this dysfunction, so what caused the low testosterone in the first place, ideally needs to be resolved, whether that's with the support of testosterone replacement therapy, or potentially it may not be needed. The individual may not need TRT. So not everyone responds to TRT the same. And while there are averages and there are trends, absolutely, there's a large deviation away from the norm in response to dose and outcomes. So your individual timeline, your symptomatic improvement, and your overall outcomes may actually have nothing in common with the status quo. So it's important to understand that you can be an outlier. Our biochemical individuality, which is the combination of our different genetics and years of living with different inputs and outputs as human beings, we've all lived very different lives up to the point that we start TRT, means that comparing 2 men on TRT is like comparing apples to oranges. They're both fruit, absolutely, but they're just as different as they are similar. So I'm going to go through some basic TRT stuff here, just as an overall premise before we get into this stuff. I am going to talk pretty quick because I've got a lot to get through. So testosterone replacement therapy can be physiological or supraphysiological at the same dose and the same level, depending on the patient's individual health status. So this whole idea that one certain number for TRT is physiological and one is supraphysiological based on a number that people come up with is nonsense, because a level that is perfectly optimal for a healthy 20-year-old is going to be supraphysiological for a obese alcoholic 70-year-old. It's 2 very different circumstances. So what is physiological for one individual has a lot to do with age and baseline health status. So TRT causes estrogenic side effects in men who have not resolved the root cause of their secondary hypogonadism, as they are flooding the body with androgens, which the body is actively suppressing. So this is a bit of a controversial take that summarizes a lot of what goes on with troubleshooting. When you get into the trenches and you health coach guys through this day in, day out, seeing thousands of guys for years, is that what you find is that when a man doesn't tolerate his optimal testosterone dose and gets these side effects, we point the finger at estrogen. But in reality, what's happening is that we have upgraded the car's engine, but we have not serviced the rest of the vehicle. So if you have a whole bunch of diet and lifestyle problems, which have led to you being hypogonadal, and then you flood your body with a bunch of androgens that your body is actively suppressing, it is illogical to think that that's just going to work out fantastically and everything's going to be hunky-dory. It doesn't happen. And that's the most important thing, is this is just what happens in reality. But it's very important that when we're working with clients, or if you are a patient on TRT, to understand that you need to meet the medicine halfway. You need to get yourself back on track to be able to get the best outcomes from your testosterone. It's not just going to do it for you. So secondly, I'm sorry, that was what I was just covering here. So the body is not enzymatically equipped or at a receptor level to actually receive and utilize optimal male androgen levels if you are living a suboptimal, unhealthy lifestyle. So testosterone replacement therapy can be used as a catalyst to help you get your shit together. But it's important that you do get said shit together. If you've just started TRT, it is completely normal to feel overwhelmed and confused. There's a lot of new territory to cover, and there is a lot of conflicting information. I wrote TRT 101 so that you can have everything that you need to know in an instruction manual in one place that you can refer back to, that you can have all the questions answered before they even come up. TRT 101 is my best practice approach for TRT from start to finish, and it contains everything that you need to avoid all the challenges and pitfalls that I've seen come up in my clients over the last 5 years. You can check it out via the link below. So, optimizing TRT, in my opinion, is not rocket science. A lot of the time, we just need to increase the injection frequency, titrate up the dose a little bit, give it 8 to 12 weeks, titrate it down if we need to, or you can use a high-potency topical transscrotal cream. Particularly in obese men, the cream tends to yield less side effects, but it can be patient to patient. But what's very important to understand with this is that if you are having side effects relating to your TRT protocol, then fixing your injection frequency or dose will fix those side effects. But daily subcutaneous injections and getting the optimal TRT dose will not fix the side effects that come from a poor diet and lifestyle, or years and years and years of psychological programming that you need to work through with someone. Testosterone is not an intoxicant. It's not just going to completely change all your thought patterns for you. It will help you do that work, but a lot of the time there needs to be some form of psychological adjustment as well. Testosterone replacement therapy is not just a drug that's going to change your brain and your mind completely. So, many issues on TRT extend beyond TRT, which is the name of the book, the protocol itself, and often involve other root cause issues, either occurring alongside or as a result of the prolonged state of hypogonadism. So we're going to start with pregnenolone. So pregnenolone is one of the most misunderstood and under and overprescribed medications in men's TRT. That is a contradiction. So what I mean by that is it is often thrown at everyone inappropriately who doesn't need it, or the guys who do need it are not tested for it, and their symptoms are not identified as a pregnenolone deficiency, and they're losing out on actually fixing the problem. The majority of young men on TRT do not have pregnenolone deficiencies. That is the fact of the matter. I have done thousands of these tests, and I've had thousands of guys come to me with their tests from my YouTube videos. And I do know that Marek Health actually include pregnenolone on their lab work, which is very rare. We can't test it in Australia anymore. A lot of countries in Europe can't test it either. But when you do run pregnenolone testing on a bunch of guys on TRT, it's actually much more common for them not to have deficiencies, especially when they're young. If you're dealing with an older population who are in their 60s and 70s as your bread and butter, you're probably going to have far more pregnenolone deficiencies, because one of the main factors for a pregnenolone deficiency is age. And a lot of content on TRT, a lot of the educational content and the perspectives are around andropause, which is this idea of testosterone declining as we get older. But a lot of the time when we're dealing with these younger guys, the pregnenolone is not the problem, and there's actually detriments to adding in extra amounts of pregnenolone when the body doesn't need it. It doesn't receive it well. So one thing that's very important to note is that TRT does not cause a systemic shutdown of pregnenolone production, irrespective of whether you use HCG or not. It doesn't. If it did, every man on TRT would be deficient in pregnenolone. But what's very important to understand why this doesn't happen is that luteinizing hormone is one of, but not the only factor for initiating the conversion from cholesterol into pregnenolone. This is an enzyme called CYP11A1, and pregnenolone is a factor for inducing that. Sorry, luteinizing hormone is, but it's not the only one. So there's three key facts to look at here. So as I said before, I've done this a lot. I've looked at pregnenolone a lot, and mechanistic theory doesn't mean shit if it doesn't actually eventuate in reality. So firstly, when you go outside and see the sky is blue, in reality, there's just not that many pregnenolone deficiencies that we do see, but they do occur. So the idea that everyone on TRT needs to take pregnenolone is incorrect. Secondly, if pregnenolone is slightly reduced on TRT, which is not the same as inducing a full-blown symptomatic deficiency, it actually makes sense because when we're putting testosterone replacement therapy in, we're actually fulfilling one of the end roles of the process of steroidogenesis, which is converting cholesterol into all the hormones in the sex hormone cascade, as well as corticosteroids. So if you're putting in testosterone, which by extension will also convert to DHT and estrogens, your body isn't going to need the same amount of pregnenolone, and the body has negative feedback systems. So it's normal for it to reduce a small amount, but that is very different from it inducing a deficiency. Lastly, the majority of men who I've worked with who've trialed pregnenolone based on the things they've seen on the internet or that they've just, spoken to their practitioner about, in any dose, whether it's 5 milligrams, 50 milligrams, 100 milligrams, 2 milligrams, when they can microdose it, in the absence of low pregnenolone levels, report negative side effects. This is just what happens. So pregnenolone and pregnenolone sulfate, as well as its metabolite allopregnenolone, which sits downstream from progesterone, play key roles in balancing GABA and glutamate neurologically. So this is called a neurosteroid. So it also modulates neural inflammation, so it acts as an antioxidant as well, and an anti-inflammatory. And it does modulate, it acts as a marionette, which is like a puppet master of various neurotransmitter production signals. So pregnenolone deficiencies are very common in older men, as pregnenolone declines with age, as well as DHEA, testosterone, T3, growth hormone, melatonin as well. But pregnenolone deficiencies can also be caused by head trauma and psychological trauma. So PTSD and head trauma can both induce pregnenolone deficiencies. So if these are part of your medical history, particularly if you're a veteran and you were around a lot of explosions or you've been concussed a lot playing professional sport or just got knocked out a bunch doing whatever, it's very important to look into this, particularly if you have negative symptoms. So these are the things that come up in practice when we're looking at a pregnenolone deficiency. The big one is anxiety and insomnia, which is a terrible combination. You can't sleep and your mind keeps you awake. It can be quite torturous. A low threshold to physical or psychological stress, including fibromyalgia. Not every fibromyalgia case is a pregnenolone deficiency. Hypersensitivity to stimulants and THC. I put THC in here particularly because pregnenolone is what's called a CB1 receptor negative allosteric modulator. It tunes down the sensitivity to THC. So being hypersensitive to THC does not mean that you have a pregnenolone deficiency, but it does come up in a trend of symptoms, particularly if it started occurring after a head trauma or a particularly traumatic event. Inability to relax and focus, can't switch off, can't focus on what you want to focus on, anxious, mind racing, horrible situation to be in. A constant feeling of malaise, overstimulation, and cranked. I like the word cranked. It sounds like you've got too much bad energy. It's like the side effects from caffeine. It's not good. Wired and tired. Debilitating brain fog, reduced verbal acuity. I usually stutter. I did it again. I usually stutter on talking about verbal acuity every time. Memory loss, that's a big one as well. But again, these things are not things that mean you have a pregnenolone deficiency. A whole bunch of other stuff can cause this. And anhedonic depression, meaning you don't feel the pleasure and the enjoyment of doing things that you should enjoy. So if you take too much pregnenolone, this is what happens. So we get an anti-androgenic cascade of events due to overconversion to progesterone. So progesterone in physiological levels is very, very important for men for a lot of functions, just like testosterone is important for women. But when we get supraphysiological amounts of progesterone in men, it acts as a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. So this will negatively impact your androgen signaling, and it will move the dial in the wrong direction away from what you're trying to optimize with your testosterone. So it's quite common for guys to start TRT, get a bunch of benefits, take some pregnenolone, and then the needle moves in the wrong direction. So reoccurrence of hypogonadal symptoms, immune system dysregulation like rashes, congested sinuses, insurmountable fatigue, needing to nap all the time, always napping, can't get enough sleep, always tired. People will be like, yeah, I'm relaxed, I'm super chill, but you can't get anything done because you're just so wrecked. Bloating and water retention, gummy worm dick, also known as Deca dick. This is the main concern that guys point out because it's the most distressing. It basically means that your dick only works to pee. That's it. Weight gain and feminine fat depositions and gynecomastia. Estrogen is not the only thing that contributes to gynecomastia. Progesterone and prolactin are also implicated. So it is crucial to run blood testing for pregnenolone. Marek do it, which is fantastic. Ideally, pregnenolone sulfate due to the longer half-life and more stable concentrations. Before anyone supplements with pregnenolone, if you're only going to remember one thing from each category from this, if your attention span is already lost, do not take pregnenolone unless you get a pregnenolone blood test. Regardless of what people say on the internet, get a blood test, and then at least you have your baseline level. But it's very important to understand, and again, I'm just going to reinforce this one point, pregnenolone deficiency symptoms can also be caused by psychological stress and psychological anxiety. So not everything is a biochemical thing that you can biohack and fix, but the symptoms will mirror one another. So you need to run comprehensive testing and have your background assessed by a health coach or a practitioner who knows what they're doing. You cannot cherry pick the benefits of pregnenolone. As much as people would like to, it's a fantastic neurosteroid. It's a fantastic nootropic. It's amazing for reducing anxiety. It has a fantastic feeling of well-being, systemic antioxidant, all these fantastic things. But if you take too much and you don't need it, you'll get side effects regardless of what you would prefer. Your body doesn't care. Daily injections are ideal because this gives you ultra stable testosterone level. If you can really frequently administer something with a very long half-life, you can keep your levels super, super stable. And I think that this is the most beneficial way to do TRT. However, how should TRT be administered? So TRT should be administered as frequently as possible.